Jeremy, you did a lot of reporting from the war zones for Democracy Now! As well as for The Nation. When did the idea for the book came up?
So I decided to focus on Afghanistan and sort of do this thing on Obama's wars. And I went to Afghanistan with my friend Rick Rowley, who's a filmmaker and journalist. So we investigated a dozen or so night raids in different parts of Afghanistan. And when we discovered that the force that was doing these raids was not just special operations forces, but that it was being led by this very elite secretive unit known as JSOC, which is effectively a sort of paramilitary wing of the White House, of the executive branch of government. It was envisioned in its founding in the early 1980s as a sort of force that would be used by presidents for discrete operations that they wanted deniability on, would operate with maximum flexibility, minimum congressional oversight, and that no one would ever basically confirm its existence.
So you observe a growing importance of JSOC. How would you describe their role in the global war on terror right now in the presidency of Obama?
And so Obama adopted this policy that he wanted to scale back, with the exception of Afghanistan, from any large-scale military interventions and to aggressively pursue anyone that the system produced evidence on that they were a threat, that they posed a threat. And I think that in the process of doing this, because he is not a Dick Cheney or a George Bush, he's tried to figure out a way to argue to both himself and at times his wife, who's opposed to some of his policies, and often to the American people, that some of the very things that were offensive about Bush and Cheney actually make sense, and they're not just the right thing to do, but they're legally legitimate. And so what they've done is to try to streamline a system, almost an algorithm, for producing who should be killed or who should be captured on any given day around the world. And the kill-capture program started to weigh very heavily in favor of killing. And Obama has engaged in something that I think clearly resembles pre-crime, preventative war. There's two basic kinds of drone strikes. One is a signature strike and the other is a personality strike. Personality strike is you know the identity of the individual who you are targeting, and you're tracking their metadata, or you are figuring out who they're talking to, or what places they're going with, who they're communicating with. You basically are mapping out their life, and you're trying to find them. So you find that person, like Anwar al-Awlaki, and you kill him in Yemen with a drone strike. Or Baytullah Masood of the Pakistani Taliban, you kill him in a drone strike. A signature strike is a beast of a different kind, and the Obama administration escalated the use of these strikes beginning in 2009. Signature strike is where you don't necessarily know the identity of people who you are specifically targeting. They fit a pattern that you've determined indicates they are probably involved with terrorist activity. And terrorist activity can be defined very loosely. There's not really a definition in the U.S. intelligence community. So you have military-age males in a region of Yemen or Pakistan who someone in their group has a number of indicators, or selectors as they call them, where you'd say, okay, they were at this restaurant with these two people, then he was at this mosque, he's been sending text messages to these two numbers that we've been tracking. We believe this person's probably a terrorist. We don't know their identity, but we believe they're likely a terrorist. So we'll go ahead and just kill that person and the people that they're with in this outdoor area. And this is happening regularly. None of these. So what you have is the U.S. is specifically, intentionally targeting individuals whose identity they don't know, and against whom they may not have any actual evidence except for patterns based on their metadata, and they're just killing them.
So an important part of your book covers the story of the targeting and killing of Anwar al-Awlaki, a U.S. citizen. Can you tell us a little bit about his story?
Al-Awlaki was a guy who was attending university. He's an American citizen who was born in the state of New Mexico in 1971, and he was attending university in the state of Colorado just as the U.S. Gulf War was starting. And he was never a particularly religious or political guy, but he got politicized by that war. So he started attending these anti-war actions, and he started to meet other students whose roots were in the Middle East, and he decides he wants to leave his studies of science and to move over to doing Islamic scholarship and studies, and ends up becoming an imam himself. Then Al-Awlaki leaves the United States, he goes to Yemen, he is attending courses at a few Islamic universities, starts to record audio sermons where he is denouncing U.S. torture. He's clearly sort of becoming more radical. Fast forward to 2004 or so, and he's seeing, Abu Ghraib stuff is coming out, Guantanamo, Iraq, and it sort of starts, his lectures start to get sharper. And he does some lecturing in Britain and elsewhere, and basically says, the U.S. is at war against Islam, and we all eventually are going to have to pick a side. He ends up back on the U.S. radar, 2005, 2006, and the Yemeni government ends up arresting Anwar al-Awlaki on these trumped-up charges that he had intervened in a tribal dispute. It was sort of a nonsensical charge, and they put him in prison for 18 months. So al-Awlaki then comes out of prison a totally changed man and very radicalized, and he starts praising al-Shabaab in Somalia, and he's calling for attacks, and he's saying, young people, young Muslims in the West should participate in attacks in their own country or come and join us in the fronts of jihad. And that basically initiated a multi-year campaign of the U.S. to either kill or capture al-Awlaki. And eventually, President Obama made a determination that he wanted al-Awlaki dead. And so the President of the United States served as the prosecutor, the judge, jury, and ultimately executioner. They never had an indictment against Anwar al-Awlaki. So Wolfgang's U.S. partners, the Center for Constitutional Rights and the American Civil Liberties Union, when they learned that Anwar al-Awlaki was on a kill list, there was a front page piece in the Washington Post that came out that revealed that al-Awlaki was on this assassination list, and so the family then started working with these lawyers from CCR and ACLU. And they filed a lawsuit against Barack Obama, against the defense secretary, against the CIA director, all these officials that are involved with the kill program. And they basically were saying, we want to know the basis for the death sentence here. I mean, that was essentially what they're asking is, how is it that an American citizen has been sentenced to death without even being charged with a crime? And the Obama administration reacted fiercely. The U.S. Justice Department, first of all, they invoked the state secrets privilege, which Obama had pledged as a candidate to limit the use of, and had criticized it when the Bush administration did. So they intervene in the case and say, oh, we have a lot of evidence here against this guy, but it's too secret, too sensitive to be made public. And if we were to show it to you, our very national security would be threatened. And so the case ultimately was dismissed, partially on procedural grounds, partially on these grounds of state secrecy. But at the end of the day, the judge, and every judge that has heard an aspect of this case, says there's something fundamentally rotten about what the Justice Department is doing here. That it reeks of injustice, but we're not going to do anything about it. He had run away from home a couple weeks before his dad was killed in this drone strike. And my understanding, based on the letter that he left for his mother, was that he wanted to go and try to find his father. So he goes to their tribal area where they live, and he's asking around and trying to figure out if he can see his dad or if anyone knows where his dad is. And while he's there, his father is killed in the north of Yemen, nowhere near where the kid is. The uprising is happening in Yemen at the time in the context of the Arab Spring, and the protests against the dictatorship of Ali Abdullah Saleh, and the roads between Shebwa, this place where he was, and Sana'a were closed down. There was fighting on some of them, so he has to stay in this village with his family. One night he is out having dinner with his cousin Ahmed, who is Yemeni and is 17, and some other young people from their tribe, and they're sitting in sort of an outdoor picnic area when a drone appears above them and launches missiles and blows the kids up. And after he was killed, the initial news reports citing anonymous U.S. officials said that he was 21 years old. And then the family produced his birth certificate showing that he had in fact just turned 16. Then they said they somehow cast him in a statement from the White House spokesperson as something between an Al-Qaeda affiliated individual and a hapless tourist. They issued a statement saying, well, we've told Americans not to travel to Yemen, and they just killed Anwar al-Awlaki's 16-year-old son, and then released a statement saying, well, he shouldn't have been traveling he lives in Yemen with his grandparents because you're trying to kill his father. So he gets killed, they do this, then they say, oh, he was meeting with Ibrahim al-Bana, who was a propagandist for Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. Well, it turns out that Ibrahim al-Bana is still alive. So why was this 16-year-old kid killed?